A woman is dead, a man seriously injured after what police are calling a domestic violence incident.
67-year-old Leon Stetson is charged with murder. Police were called Monday night to Oak Street after a person found blood inside a home.
I cried for a whole day, to be honest. I haven't cried like that in a long time.
9:41 p.m., June 8th. A phone call comes into Winchester Police Dispatch. Someone has walked into a home on Oak Street in Winsted, Connecticut, and found blood. Not a little. Enough to make a person's hands shake while dialing. The caller says something else. No one inside is responding. When officers go through the open front door, they find blood on the bathroom sink and vanity upstairs. Then, in a nearby bedroom, they find 54-year-old Carrie Stetson. They check for a pulse. For breathing, there's neither. She'd be pronounced dead at 10:16 that night, from sharp force injuries to her neck and torso. A few feet away, also on that floor, is her husband, Leon Stetson. 67 years old, twitching, breathing irregular, a 4-inch cut across his own throat. Here's what makes this different from a random act of violence. Carrie had a piece of paper that was supposed to prevent this exact scenario. A judge had signed it. Leon Stetson was legally barred from being anywhere near her. He was there anyway. So how does a man legally barred from a house end up dying on its bedroom floor next to the woman he wasn't allowed near? That's the question this story answers, piece by piece. Before any of this, Carrie Stetson ran a place called the Railway Café on Main Street in Winsted. She'd moved it there in 2021 from the neighboring town of Canaan, taking on a 250-year-old building during a pandemic, because, as she'd put it herself, opening that cafe had been a lifelong vision, a way to show her 3 children that dreams could come true. People who knew her don't describe a business owner. They describe a fixture. She sat on the town's Economic Development Commission. She catered events around the region. She fostered animals that had nowhere else to go. The town manager would later say he wished they had 1 million more residents like her.
Yeah, she was on numerous boards and commissions. She owned the Railway, a restaurant right down the street on Route 44. Active in the community, invested in the community. Just a wonderful person.
She was a part of our Women of Winsted, which, was a bunch of women-owned businesses trying to just make our Main Street even stronger. Carrie was just something as a town manager. I wish, again, there was 1 million of those residents. It's a tremendous loss to this community.
She was a mother of 3, Piper, Ben, and Nicole. And by the spring of 2026, she was also a woman trying to get away from her husband. That's the part most people don't think about when they imagine a protective order. It's not the end of a problem. It's the beginning of a very specific kind of danger, one that researchers in domestic violence cases have flagged for decades. The period right after a victim separates from an abuser is statistically one of the most lethal windows in the entire relationship. Not before, after. Which raises the real question underneath this entire case. Are the legal protections built for that dangerous window actually strong enough? Or do they just look strong on paper? Tell us what you think once you've heard the whole story, because Carrie's case is about to put that question to the test. Carrie had already lived through one violent incident with Leon. She'd already gone to court. She'd already gotten the order. She thought that was the hard part. On June 8th, a family member would later tell investigators they'd been worried about exactly this. That Leon would hurt Carrie. It wasn't a vague fear. It was specific enough that Carrie herself had written it down. Months earlier, in her own application for the protective order, she named the danger. The court agreed it was real. And on June 8th, at 9:41 p.m., that danger walked through her front door. To understand how Leon Stetson ended up in that house, you have to go back to April 15th. Court records describe Leon as someone whose life had been shaped for years by a severe crack cocaine addiction. The kind that doesn't just damage a person, it damages everyone orbiting them. On April 15th, that damage came to a head.
They said Leon was a longtime crack cocaine user and physically assaulted his wife in April. They worried Leon would hurt Carrie, and she shared that fear. In an application for a protective order, she wrote her and her children feel unsafe by Leon's behavior and drug use, and that she was afraid to be alone with Leon. That protective order was granted and was in effect when Carrie was murdered.
Carrie described that night herself, in her own words, in her application for the protective order. She'd wanted to remove her son's girlfriend from the home, since the girlfriend was afraid to stay there alone with Leon given his condition. Leon, she wrote, became immediately verbally abusive and accusatory. He ripped a necklace off her neck, and when she tried to call the police, he grabbed her arm with force, took the phone out of her hand, and smashed it. It was her son's girlfriend, hearing the disturbance, who ended up calling police instead. Leon was arrested. The charges? Disorderly conduct, second-degree criminal mischief, and interfering with an emergency call. Following that arrest, a judge issued a no-contact protective order. It barred Leon from assaulting, threatening, abusing, harassing, following, interfering with, or stalking Carrie. It required him to surrender his firearms. It listed the Oak Street residence specifically as protected. It was set to remain active until July 27th. On paper, Carrie Stetson had every protection the law could offer. What she didn't have was protection from the law's biggest blind spot. A protective order is a legal boundary, not a physical one. It tells a person where they're not allowed to go. It does nothing, on its own, to stop them from going there anyway. Enforcement only happens after a violation, which means someone has to get close enough to violate it first. Carrie had the law on her side. She did not have a wall, a guard, or a guarantee. When investigators processed the scene at Oak Street, they searched for the obvious explanation. A broken window, a kicked-in door, some sign that Leon had to fight his way past a locked boundary to get to her. They found none of that. No forced entry. That single detail changes the entire shape of this case. It means Leon didn't break in. He got inside some other way, despite a court order that had existed for nearly 2 months specifically to prevent this. Investigators also obtained a search warrant for Leon's cell phone and found messages inside the Messenger app. What those messages said hasn't been made public in detail, but their existence became part of the evidence used to build the case against him. A digital trail running parallel to a man who was never supposed to be within reach of her again. By that evening, Carrie was home. What happened next inside that house wasn't witnessed by anyone outside of it. It would only be reconstructed afterward, through evidence, and through the words of the one person who survived it. Officers who responded that night moved fast once they found Leon still breathing. They gave him medical aid on the spot, packing gauze against the 4-inch cut on his neck. Ambulance crews took over from there. Leon went first to Winsted Healthcare, then by Lifestar helicopter to Hartford Hospital, in critical condition. For a day, he couldn't speak. The injury to his throat had taken that from him, but on June 9th, around 7:30 in the evening, hospital staff called Winchester Police with an update. Leon Stetson was awake, alert, and he was writing. State police detectives arrived just after 8 p.m. They asked their questions out loud. Leon answered with a marker and a piece of paper, knowing, because they told him directly, that he could stop at any moment. He didn't stop. He wrote that he and Carrie had talked, that she'd told him to leave. Then he wrote 3 words that would end up at the center of the state's case against him. Things got ugly. He also wrote, "You know how I did it," and that he'd tried to take his own life afterward because of what he'd done. A man, lying in a hospital bed, throat wrapped in bandages, voluntarily writing down the worst thing he had ever done, in his own handwriting, on paper that would later be entered into evidence. No moment in this case carries more weight than that legal pad. And it's worth deciding for yourself, before the aftermath, whether that confession reads like something sudden, or something that had been building for weeks. The answer changes how you see everything that follows. The next day, an autopsy confirmed what the scene had already suggested. Carrie's death was ruled a homicide, caused by sharp force injuries.
A lot of tear-filled trips to the Railway Café Wednesday here on Main Street. Carrie Stetson was the owner. Virtually everyone knew her. Flowers now line the outside and inside of her restaurant.
I cried for a whole day, to be honest. I haven't cried like that in a long time.
David Castillo was a friend of Carrie Stetson's. He says she was just an incredibly kind soul, a constant volunteer for anything that needed it, or a person to talk to for anyone who needed it. She was found dead Monday evening in her home after a domestic violence incident. Her husband, Leon Stetson, is in critical condition.
She made an impact on a lot of people's lives, and obviously, this happening is the most tragic thing I've seen in Winsted ever.
Her cafe was the spot for breakfast in town. Businesses all over downtown Winsted have been posting pictures online with her while she was visiting or making friends with anyone.
Utter shock. I think this has just shaken up our whole community. She was a beloved member of our community. Her Railway Café wasn't just a business to people in this town.
Fred Richards owns the jewelry store next door and owns the Railway Café building. He rented it out to Carrie, who at one point paid more than her rent to help him out.
I had to do some work, put an air exchanger in there. She says, "How much is that going to cost you?" I said, "Well, it's about $7,000. She started paying me $200 more a month than what I was asking for because she felt bad that the air exchanger was so expensive.
On Thursday, June 11th, Leon Stetson was arrested on an active warrant while still a patient at Hartford Hospital. The charges: murder, home invasion, and criminal violation of a protective order. Police were careful to call it an isolated domestic violence incident. No danger to the public, no third party they were searching for. He was arraigned the following day, virtually, from his hospital bed. The court set bond at $3 million. He could not pay it. His case was later continued to June 23rd. Back in Winsted, the response wasn't loud. It was quiet, and it was everywhere. By Tuesday morning, the day after she died, community members had already flooded the Railway Café with flowers. The town's mayor wrote that Winchester had lost not just a businesswoman, but a friend, and that the town felt darker for it. Local nonprofits Carrie had quietly supported for years: an animal rescue, a community mural project, a legal history museum down the street from her cafe, all posted their own tributes, each one describing the same thing in different words. A woman who showed up, consistently, for people who needed her to.
And what a light she was to our community. She'll be deeply missed. Thank you.
Carrie Stetson, known throughout Winsted and the surrounding towns for spreading happiness and joy with her baking and ice cream. Friends say she would be the one you would lean on in the time of a crisis, like the one they're in now.
She was a shoulder to cry on during the difficult days, because we're all small businesses, and she was a shining star, not just for us, for this whole community.
Her Railway Café, just up the street from the Little Red Barn Brewers. It's a lively place with a musician in the corner. But when you walk in on this Friday night, there's a quiet chatter, heavy hearts. She is well known here. It's where her kids worked. It's where the community now gathers to mourn her loss.
The legacy is in her children. They're amazing individuals, and what's important to all of us, they need time to heal. They just want their friends and family around them, and they want time to heal. They're great kids.
State police say she lost her life to domestic violence. The townspeople say they will remember her for her love. They raised nearly $100,000 on GoFundMe, and tickets to a spaghetti dinner selling out in less than 10 hours.
It takes a village, and now this village has 3 more kids to raise, and we'll stand by them all the way.
The whole town's doing a light up the night purple. They've got purple balloons, purple decorations, purple light bulbs for domestic violence awareness. We're told the hardware store is already sold out, and every time they get a shipment in, they immediately disappear as people are turning on that purple light for Carrie.
A GoFundMe was organized for her 3 children. Other small business owners along Main Street bought purple lights from a local hardware store and put them in their windows, purple being the color long associated with domestic violence awareness. No press conference asked them to do it. They just did. Here's what's left once the legal proceedings run their course and the cameras move to the next story. A protective order existed. It was active. It listed the exact address where Carrie died. It had 2 more months left to run. None of that stopped a man with no forced entry from ending up in her bedroom that night. The system in this case wasn't broken because no one followed the rules. It failed because the rules were never built to physically stand between a person and someone determined enough to ignore them. That idea is worth passing on to someone else, because the more people understand how separation can become the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship, the more likely someone recognizes the warning signs before it's too late. Carrie Stetson spent years making other people's days a little easier. The least this story can do is make sure people remember why that mattered, and the least you can do, watching it, is tell us which detail in this case is going to stay with you longest.